Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Balanced. Today, we are asking the question, is having children necessary to be a contributing member of society? As always, I'm Ben.
And I'm Steve.
And we're glad you're listening.
All right. So, um, interesting topic here. I think to start, we're talking about having children. We should just put it out there and provide our status to everybody. So, Ben, do you have any kids?
I do not have kids yet.
Okay. So the word "yet" there makes it sound, if that's not too personal for me to ask, that maybe there are some plans in the future.
Yeah, it's a definite possibility in the future. My wife and I are still kind of working through and making some decisions. But yeah, I think we're certainly going to try to have kids.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I know about that. It took, I do have kids. I have two kids. I have a 22-year-old and a 19-year-old.
They're not kids anymore.
Well, no, not kids anymore. Yeah. So sons, both sons. And speaking of what you just talked about, I remember when we were decided that we wanted to try to have a baby, that it took quite a while. I was on the road a lot for work and back and forth. And I think that was part of the issue, just, the timing. And,
Timing is
but
very important.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then we did some tests. I went through the test, everything was good. And because it was like over a year, and we were like, well, is this going to, and then there's a drug or medicine that's called Clomid. I think, yeah, it's probably short for something much longer. My wife took that and was like, bam, a week later.
Huh.
So when they have those things are really effective. You're trying for 13, 14 months. And then the doctor's like, well, just take this pill.
I mean, that sounds like the smallest degree of medical intervention you could have, and it sounds like it worked pretty much straight away.
Yeah, absolutely. And they said it's a very small dose too and everything. And it just was, it worked. So yeah, I have, so I've got some experience. I don't have experience with girls having girls, but I definitely have experience with raising some sons. So if you do have um, a little baby and it's a little baby girl, I can't help you with any advice. So, um, so initial thoughts on this topic, like, is having children necessary to be a contributing member of a society? I want to clarify this, like, for me, when I'm thinking of this, before I get your first take on this, is I'm thinking like society, me, contributing member. I'm sort of linking that to the race and the species, not just like the American society or the society I live in Maryland in the United States, or I'm sort of talking about as being a person, being a member of the human race, a member of the species. Like, so that's sort of what I'm thinking. Like, um, is that what you were thinking? It was we were really talking about here.
Well, I'm glad you clarified. I mean, because that is an important distinction. No, I was thinking of it in terms of like culturally, wherever you happen to live or whatever contributions you make to your community, your city, even your own life, and those people that are kind of in your orbit.
I agree, and that's sort of like what I mean too. Like, sort of, because you're only going to affect the certain part. Like, if I'm having a child and maybe that person grows up to be something and has an impact on society, like, it's probably much more going to have an impact on the where I live and my culture than maybe like it would in China or India or something. But still,
Sure.
it could, right? Depending. So your initial thoughts on this topic: is having children necessary to be a contributing member?
Yeah, I mean, I would say no. I feel like at this very early stage of the discussion, it seems like it would be very difficult to even make that argument because, um, people throughout history, people have made all kinds of contributions that were totally separate from whether or not whether they propagated or had kids or raised a family or whatever. I mean, um, it seems like you can do any number of good things for for humanity, for your community, whatever, totally separate from whether or not you have kids.
Yeah, yeah, no, I hear that, and it's funny because I think of it sort of a little different way. When I'm thinking of this, I'm thinking like, I think it's necessary. My first take is, and of course we're going to discuss this, but because anyone who did something great that really helped society or culture, all those things you're talking about, even if that person didn't have kids, like someone had them, and like so, some of these things would never happen. Like if everyone just right now said, "Nope, kids are lame. We're not having them," then we just all die off, right? So it's sort of like to keep things going in progress. That's my that's sort of the angle I'm coming from.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that sounds like a little bit of a different question because we're saying that's is having, of course, having kids is good, and the species procreating itself is is good. That's what keeps us, evolving, progressing, moving forward. That's a little bit different than asking, is it necessary to have children in order to, you know, uh, to go back to the title of the episode, contribute to society?
Yeah, yeah. I actually, and my sort of slant, the way I think about it is that's part of my contribution. Like you could say, "Hey, what have you done for society, Steve?" Well, I worked these jobs, I did these things, I worked in the community and did this, that, and the other as I grew up, and I was part of I was someone who was just involved in the economy and buying and spending and making money, and so that way, but also I gave two kids to society, two who are now adults, 19 and 22. It's debatable that we call that adults right away,
Yeah,
but
yeah, but high functioning, and they're out
yeah,
there trying to do good, and yeah, I get what you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah. So that's sort of the way I wanted to look at this, because this in society, when we think about it, just talk about, for people who don't have children, childlessness defined, um, and this is how they define childlessness on census.gov. Says, of course, makes sense, having zero biological children. That's as simple as that. Now,
Well, that would mean if you are if you get married and your partner, your spouse, has children from a previous relationship, and you're the step parent, you would, under this
yes,
definition, you would be childless.
you would be childless, um, although clearly contributing to the life of someone else. So,
Sure.
and now in 2018, a little more than 1 in 7 women were childless by the age of 40 to 44. And in 1976, which, what's that, almost 50 years ago, um, actually 45 years ago ish.
You know,
Yeah.
that's you. Oh, that caught me. I hear 76, and I still think for some reason that was like 30 years ago. In my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, the 70s. I'm
Well,
like, I'm mentally stuck in it being the year 2000 still, I guess.
yeah, yeah, and 76, I hear that, I'm thinking, oh, the little quarters, the bicentennial quarters came out, and it was a big thing on 4th of July. Um, so in 1976, the number was 1 in 10. So there's more, 1 in 7 in 2018, 1 in 10 in 76. So there's more childless women.
That doesn't surprise me. I mean, if you look at kind of the the progression of our culture, specifically the American lifestyle has changed. I mean, it used to be when the husband would go to work and the wife was a homemaker, and those traditional gender roles and all that stuff seems to be not quite as prevalent.
Yeah, so like you said, more women have a full career and can completely support themselves, and times have changed, and so it would make sense that they may decide not to have children because they say, hey, this is getting in the way of my career and the things I'm doing and my aspirations for whatever it is that they might be involved with it. So yeah, it makes sense. That's not a surprise, but the number is going up of childlessness, according to that, slowly, right? So
Also, one other point on that
yeah,
is that
yeah,
things life has become so much more expensive, that
Yes.
has to be a factor. I mean, everything from college to groceries to cars to, I mean, everything. Life is just, you used to be able to live very comfortably on a single income. That's no longer the case for most people. And, I could see why someone would say, like, well, obviously having kids is very expensive. And in a world where everything is expensive, um, some people have to ask the question, do I want to introduce kids into a situation where it's going to be financially tight? Do I want to be financially strapped?
Sure, sure. That's definitely absolutely has to be. Now you can't do it basically unless you have two people working. Whereas, like you said before, maybe in the 50s, like there could be one.
Right.
Um, so the trends, we just talked about the trends, like that number of childlessness going up. If we look at in 2018, sort of another way to look at it, adults 55 to 64 in 2018, 19.6% were childless. Now, at the same time, those 65 to 74, it was 15.9%, and 75 plus is 10.9% childless, all in 2018. So it shows that the older people had more children at the time, and just another way to look at that trend. So it is trending to have more childless people. And in 2021, just last year, a Pew survey showed that 44% of Americans 18 to 49, and that's basically childbearing ages for women, correct? So
Mm-hmm.
44% weren't already parents said it's unlikely they would be one.
That's very nearly half.
Very nearly half said, "Yeah, I don't have them, and I don't think I will," which is a 7% increase. That number in 2018, just 3 years prior, was at 37%. So it's going up.
Mm-hmm.
It could be dealing with what, like you said, the a lot of the economics of it all, right? So you know, looking at the replacement rate, I was on a website called Axios.com, and 2.1 children per woman in the United States. This is United States right now that I'm talking about. 2.1 children per woman would be the replacement rate, meaning our population would remain the same if there was no immigration and any of that, people coming and going. Just if everyone stayed right where they're at, no new people in the country, which clearly is not the case. But to keep the same population rate, a woman would have to have over, on average 2.1 children. And right now we are at about 1.7. And I'm not going to cut that up into different cultures and different subcategories of the population, but that's just overall
Yeah.
in the United States. So we're not even at the rate where I mean, our population won't go up if we don't have immigration right now, based upon these numbers.
Yeah. The birth rate.
Yeah. So now, reasons why are people saying when they were asked in surveys that they aren't having children? People say, well, declining rates of marriage and coupling. We talked about that. Less people think, I don't think I need to get married. It's, so, and just people even living together and saying, we're going to have children, even if they don't get married. There's less of that. And we talked about that a little bit about on our episode on marriage. And this is what you talked about a little bit, but sort of different. People said it's too time and labor intensive.
Yeah.
So
I think people historically didn't really weigh that out when they were thinking about, it's just what you did. I think that's how it was kind of thought of. Like, you got married relatively young relative to what we think of, today, and you had kids relatively young, and then you were just in this the chaos of child rearing. And I think people are a lot more thoughtful about it now, and really, understand and ask themselves, is this something that I want?
yeah, I mean, I think people who don't have children have, well, maybe they do have a clue, but I would off the cuff say even if they think they have a clue, they don't have a clue how much time you devote to those children and how labor intensive it is for not to mention the money, right? The clothes and feeding them and bathing them, and if they get sick, and then making sure they go to school and trying to help them socialize properly. And like it is, making sure they're trying to keep active and healthy, and just
A huge undertaking.
it's huge. So I can see why people say, I don't know that if I wouldn't think though that could be, someone could say, well, that's sort of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Someone's just like self-centered.
Yeah, but I think that's okay if someone recognizes that and realizes like, hey, I know myself and I know that I'm not going to be able to devote myself to raising a kid. Like you kind of have to you kind of have to respect that level of self-awareness.
Yeah, I could get along with that. You don't want people to, yeah, you don't want people to undertake something just, where their whole heart's not in it, right? It's a bad idea. I was talking to someone at work like probably a year ago, and this one person said, I don't really feel like I want to supervise people at this point in my career, but in order to get a promotion, I may have to.
Yeah,
And someone else said, hey, listen, you got to do what you want to do, because I sure as hell wouldn't want a supervisor who doesn't want to be a supervisor, right?
sure, sure.
Just to check the box. And I sure as hell wouldn't want a parent who doesn't want to be a parent. Same thing.
Yeah, that's a good example. I mean, I know a guy that same situation. He had a position. He took a leadership role, hated it, and after a year, he just wanted his old job back because he didn't like managing people, and it's not what he wanted to be doing. And you got to like, as they say, as I've said on the program before, water finds its level, and if you have some sense of what that level is, good for you.
Yeah. So people, one of the reasons people gave was they're worried about not being a good parent. And I think maybe if someone maybe had experience that they felt they were raised poorly, maybe that might be a little more prevalent there. I'm not sure.
You know what the irony is of that one is that precisely the type of person who would have that concern is probably someone who would be a more thoughtful, considerate parent, because the types of people that are really poor parents never even ask themselves that question.
Yeah.
It seems.
I agree. I agree. That's it. It's interesting. Someone who would be that concerned. I don't know if I'll do that good of a job. Got to be really careful, and maybe they're extra. I mean, I don't want them to be overthinking everything and have sort of paralysis by analysis. But just
I mean,
yeah,
doesn't the fact that they even have that concern indicate like, all right, this is good. That's the kind of person.
yeah. I think you're right. Yeah. So, okay, environmental concerns. What do you think about that? This is sort of like people saying, "Hey, listen, like, the environment and overpopulation, and like, we are already doing hurting the environment as how many humans we have and of all of our progress, and if we have more, it's just not good." You think that holds water? Or?
A little bit. I mean, I would lump some other things into there as well, not just the actual environment and the health of the planet, which we are deteriorating on a very long timeline, um, but also the geopolitical climate. I think there's very real concerns about the divisiveness that we see in America, for example. Those are all, that's the world that you're bringing kids into, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and there's no real way to know what the world is going to look like in 40 or 50 years. So I think it's worth asking some of those questions. I don't think that I don't think that people should not have kids for that reason. People are going to solve these problems, and some of those people haven't been born yet.
Yeah. And I just thought of something when you were talking there, environmental concerns. It could be like, let's say, someone's like is living in somewhere in the city, and they're thinking they could have kids, and they don't really, and let's say it's a dangerous, crime ridden area, and they're like, I don't want to bring a child into this, until maybe maybe they can save money to get into a what they consider a better place. So environment could mean something like that too, right?
Sure.
So in a Pew survey, again going back to them, um, people, a lot of people said, I don't have the percentage on that, but one of the biggest, it was actually top 6 reasons people say, I just don't want them. I just don't want kids. And that's not even because they're saying it's too time and labor. Yeah, yeah, I know it's time intensive and labor intensive, but I don't want them. And I don't want them not because it's time and labor intensive, or not because I'm worried about being a good parent, or not because I'm not married, or not because of environmental concerns, but just because they're like, I don't want to. That's like,
Well, there must be, and there is some, there are reasons. It's not that they just don't want to. There's reasons they don't want to, but they're just kind of, yeah, it's unspecified. It's
yeah,
they've
unspecified.
decided.
Yeah, yeah, and but I've seen this change. So let me give you an example. I had someone I knew who, I won't use any names, of course, someone who was probably, when they were in just out of college, and sort of normal, like college, went between 18 and like 22, 23, got out within around 4 years, got their degree, was trying to get a job, got married to someone, to their high school sweetheart. And, they didn't go to the same college, but went off to different colleges and then got back together, got married. And this person was like, yeah, it was a female. I am not having kids. And like, I don't want kids. It's too much trouble. And this person was very sort of left leaning in nature and saying like, yeah, I don't want, so brought up the world that we're creating, and I don't want to bring them up because of the environment. And it was like all these reasons, these supposedly this well thought out art, I guess rationalized argument is that here's why, and I'm not doing it. Plus I'm focusing on my career and going to do all these great things in my life. And like, okay, I mean, but very, very serious about like, nope, not doing it. And now that person's got 2 kids, ended up being a stay-at-home mom for the majority of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's amazing how priorities change.
and I think part of it, could be partly biological, like in like, hey, it's time and your body's telling you things. Because I mean, the body mind are connected, right? I mean, we know that. So like, is there a time and where, a woman might feel like, hey, I need to have kids? Like, I wonder this. I don't know. We should
I think
ask
that
some
is the
folks.
case because I know I have friends too. Well, my wife and I are at an age where a lot of our friends have started. It's probably about half and half, I would say. We have half of our couple friends that we know have had kids. The vast majority of them needed medical intervention. They were unable to get pregnant on their own, which is another factor here. Seems like it's getting more and more difficult uh, to start a family without relying on science. And the other half don't. And I definitely know some. I have, yeah, female friends who were maybe not staunchly against, but certainly not um, consumed by or obsessed with the idea of having kids. And then, one day they decided. Maybe people think about at a certain point, you start thinking about your legacy and
Uh,
what you're going to leave behind. And I'm sure that's part of it too.
yeah. So that's what, there we go. The contribution, right? That's the legacy could be part of that, right? So, but I don't know if it's actually some sort of biological, like they talk about the biological clock, and then is there something that like somehow internally the person just knows and gets this feeling like, hey, like if, I better pull the trigger, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think the answer to that question is yes. And even in my own experience, my wife for a long time was, um, I mean, not indifferent, but we would have the conversation from time to time, like, oh yeah, do we think we want to have kids someday, or what are we going to do? And then it just shifted to uh, absolutely 100%. We want to do that. So I've seen it play out.
Yeah, yeah. So it can change. So even though that big, group of people said, oh, I just don't want them. Like that could change. So for any of those people, so we've seen that. Um, so that doesn't necessarily point to like a big trend or anything. It was just a something that Pew had asked and people had given the answer to. So talking about having kids, that's propagation. I went to dictionary.com and just got a definition, and it's very simple: to reproduce or cause to reproduce, to breed, right? So and I did a little bit more research. I was this Earth Guide website from University of California, San Diego. Um, in this sort of Earth Guide website, they said one of the things that I'm quoting here: the apparent goal of every organism is to fill the available world with its offspring. End quote. And then sort of a little bit further down, quote, it remains to be seen whether the mindless drive towards expansion that we share with all other organisms can be checked by intelligent internal feedback before it is halted by lack of resources. So, wow, this is making me feel like I'm thinking of like these alien invasion movies now.
Hmm.
People say, oh, they're out of resources and they keep reproducing. And they're in, the checked by the intelligent internal feedback in these science fiction movies. They're like, we need to go take over another planet, get some more resources. It sort of makes me think of that. But I mean, they're sort of, saying, hey, yeah, that's the goal of organisms to, propagate. Now, and then have you read the book Sapiens?
I that is on my list, and I believe I'm a third of the way through. So it's started,
Okay,
unfinished.
so and I forget the guy's last name, but Yuri is his first name. Great book, a lot of information in there, a lot of food for thought too. And one of the points that
And this
he
book is just for people who aren't familiar with it. It's a essentially an overview of human the human experience, starting from uh, the when I guess it was around 200,000 years ago when our current form of Homo sapiens came into being, right? It kind of covers like human history.
A brief history of humankind, and it's by Yuval, not Yuri, Yuval Noah Harari. And it's a New York Times bestseller, really good book. And one of the things that he said in there that I thought really, really made sense is like, hey, if we're saying success of a species um, is just propagation, is that what counts? He said, then like by definition, if that's the definition of successful and the goal of a species, then chickens, rats, and mice, and that's to exclude all insects, have won, because there are so many chickens based upon the number of them we consume and breed. Like if it's just not pure numbers, so that can't be that easy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that we're getting into like a very philosophical. Those creatures, sure, they might be very good at reproducing, and there might be huge numbers of them on Earth, but there's no, they're not creating anything, and they're not making the world better, and they're not. So it's a little bit different. I mean, we've talked on other episodes about how we both think of and agree that we are animals too as human beings. We're just functioning on a higher level.
Yeah, and I get you. So my point for when I did this research, like the apparent goal of every organism is to fill the available world with its offspring. Then what is wrong with people who don't want kids?
Well, I think it comes back to this idea of intelligent internal feedback, right? If you're we all have a natural drive. That's the sex drive. Everyone
Yeah.
wants to have sex, or most healthy people want to have sex. If you separate, right, the act from the outcome, and you ask yourself these questions and say, well, for all of the reasons that you and I just talked about, some people might say, well, I don't feel ready, or I don't necessarily want to bring a kid into this world. I'm still going to have sex. I'm just going to do it in a way that, you know, minimizes the chances of there being offspring. And to come back to the human animal thing, we're really the only species that has that kind of self-awareness and control. For every other animal, it's let me find some food, let me have some sex, let me try not to get eaten or killed, repeat.
Yeah, and maybe though, I don't know. Wow, we'd have to do some research because if I'm thinking of okay, so let's take a pack of wolves, and there's the alpha male and alpha female, right? And they mate and they have offspring, and the rest of the pack, based upon their hierarchy, and I think there's similar hierarchies like in troops of chimpanzees and different things. I mean, so I guess I can't say like what's wrong with people who don't want to have kids, because there are people part of those hierarchies, not people, there are animals in parts of those hierarchies that are not creating offspring. You know what I'm saying?
But that's not a conscious choice that they made. There's other factors.
Well, oh, yeah, no, I hear you. There's other factors based upon the dominant and but I guess what I'm saying is, if I think of that, I go back to my comment and saying, what's wrong with people who don't want to have kids? And it's like, well, that's not, doesn't necessarily hold water, because even though your argument or your reason for that was because of the intellect and the ability to do that, there's still other animals. We could still make the bridge the gap and say it's not uncommon for animals of many sorts to not be having offspring.
Yeah. This is, I mean, I'm not an expert of this, but just to use the wolf pack example, when you have an alpha that doesn't let one of the beta wolves in the pack breed, and I'm assuming that that's how those dynamics work in a wolf pack, where it's like, it's not that the beta wolves don't want to, it's that they're not, they, the alpha either prevents them, or the women, the female wolves only go to the alpha. I'm guessing it's something like that.
Yeah,
That
and it's usually in from what I know from a little bit of reading that I've done, that it's usually only really that alpha and one alpha female. They're like, hey, this is the group right here, until someone could beat this guy out, or till that younger wolf goes out on its own and becomes and tries to find another female, create its own pack. So it's very, very controlled. But
Yeah, well, I was going to say that's a lot of that's instinctual, and that has
yeah,
to be a mechanism of just the mechanism of evolution that
yeah,
is working to ensure that the best genes get passed on.
yeah. No, no, I got you. So I mean, it's but still, if I can find certain breeds of animals and say to myself, there are parts in certain groups that aren't breeding, even if it's because they're stopped. I mean, that then it doesn't make it so strange for me to say, well, there's some guy over here, he doesn't want to have kids. All right, so reasons for and against. There's a website I was looking at called wehavekids.com, and they had both. It was just a lot of things, and just sort of want to pop through this list for and against real quick, just to see what your thoughts are. I know you were, when we did something sort of similar in the religion episode, where you were like, okay, I'm going to knock these bowling pins down one at a time. so let's see how this goes. I'm not saying that you're totally against, I didn't say that, but just to see if these are things that make any sense, or if it's just a bunch of crap, right? Um, so reasons for, um, carry on the family line and the family values. What do you think about that?
I mean, yeah, I think that like the fact is, every single person walking around on Earth today has um, is here because somebody had them. Somebody got pregnant and brought, went through the pregnancy and gave birth to them. And that is true going back, generation to generation to generation to generation, back hundreds of years, thousands of years. You can trace that line. And yeah, I think this is something that you and I have talked about before, but there is I do think there is merit in asking, like, who am I to say that that line that stretches back thousands of years of
Yeah.
through ancestry, who am I to say, all right, it ends here, it stops with me?
Yeah, that's a big step, right? If you think about it. So, and I think of these families, when you talk about the values carrying on in the line, I think about these like family crests. You know, they have like some of these European, like they used to have a symbol for, I don't know whether it was Scottish or things. I've seen that before. Like the family would have their own like symbol,
Yeah,
even, you know.
yeah, sure.
So they say four reasons for having kids, because children are great. People just love children, and I mean, okay, I get it. That's like puppies are cute, right? Doesn't mean you should go buy 10 of them. Um, people say it's just biology, it's natural. I get that too, and I think it is. Um, and I don't know if that's a reason for, but that's a sort of rationalization of why, right?
Well,
Um,
saying because we have this biological capability, we should use it.
yeah, yeah. And then they go to unconditional love. This is talking about a parent sort of having unconditional love for the child, and I think probably back and forth, and people are like the child for the parent. Even in cases, probably there's some cases where it's probably not even right. You know what I'm saying? Like a parent that's not too good of a parent and maybe mistreats someone, and the child still loves them because that's on some level, you know.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know if I can wrap my head, but they're trying to say, hey, it creates a situation of unconditional love, and that's just a good thing because it's not, I'm loving you so I can do this, or so you can buy me a house, or so, you know, just because I love you because, you know, you're part of me, sort of. All right. So, providing a new life. This is a four. Providing a new life the chance to enjoy existence. So, you know, hey, there's some great things about life, and letting someone else enjoy that, right? You know, if you remember something really great in your life that you're like, wow, that was great, that was awesome, you know, whether it's like your first kiss or the first time you had sex, or something that you're like really like, wow, man, that was cool, that was like, I
No.
got to experience that. And like they're saying, hey, that's a good thing, pass that on, have someone else be able to experience that.
Yeah. So I will say with that one, just as a counterpoint, there's also quite a lot of pain and suffering that comes with the human experience. So there's that aspect. But the main thing that I want to say about that is that that idea that, like, oh, let's give someone else the chance to enjoy this, that really only applies if you think about it like, oh, the souls are lined up, just waiting for their chance to come down and get to enjoy. And I don't think that's the case. I don't, if you choose not to have a kid, you're not denying anyone anything because that person doesn't exist, never existed, and never will exist. So there's nothing is
Sure.
being missed.
No, nothing's being missed, but you could still have yet another, right, another creature experiencing. I mean, I get what you're saying though. So
Okay. All right.
so providing life meaning was the next one they had. Now I don't, I got to tell you, I struggle with this, Ben. Like if someone's like, hey, like I had a kid because like it gave my life meaning, that means my life meant something. Some people can't have kids. It doesn't, you know, I mean, I feel like life meaning has to be a little bit more than just procreation that anybody can do. I mean,
Yeah.
there's people who get pregnant and have kids so they can make sure they, their welfare check is bigger. I mean, let's not beat around the bush.
Sure. Yeah, I'm tempted to um I'm when I hear that, having kids imbued my life with meaning. Actually, what I think of, and I'm going to hold a mirror up, for example, just because you wrote a book about uh, wrestling and your kind of journey coaching your boys through their wrestling careers. And what one of the things I got from the book when I read it was that the wrestling and the family's participation, the entire family was deeply, deeply involved in this. It was part of, it was one of the pillars of your family experience. You're raising the kids. The four of you guys were very involved in it through all those years. There does seem to be a significant amount of meaning in that, not in the wrestling, but in like kind of shared experience.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that. But I just felt like if someone would be like, well, my life had no meaning until I had kids. Like, I don't know, I go that far.
Yeah, I wouldn't agree with that either.
No, no. And the last one they have in the fours here says you know, we have the chance to have improvement over what the last generation did, like to be better.
Mm.
But that, I don't think that could be maintained for sure always.
No, I would push back against that. Just looking at the state of the world, things seem to be getting worse.
Yeah, yeah.
Although
So,
it is interesting on that point
uh
that it does seem like progress was set in motion. It's been in motion generation after generation. The world keeps evolving. And that progress is unstoppable. It's unstoppable. Like, we are moving forward. There will be advances in technology, in medicine, in science. We will travel to Mars and other planets, maybe even leave the solar system someday. So all those things seem, if we can survive as a species, all of those things will happen. Like, it never goes backwards. Even if we're never going to say, you know what, people get killed in car accidents. Cars are making all this pollution, and we're using all this oil and crude oil for gasoline and stuff. Let's just go back to riding horses everywhere. You
Yeah.
can't. It just can't do it. It's never going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. Yeah. So that one's not really holding water. Okay. Reasons against having kids. We talked about some of these. Environment, right? And we talked about the types of environment, economy. And I think what they're talking about is basically the cost of kids and the high cost of everything. Obviously, you don't want to be strapped and say, hey, I had a kid, but it's really tough to put food on the table, for that kid. That's a problem. Children create stress, and that can create unhappiness. You can lose, your sleeping habits can be jacked up, especially when it's a little baby. I think this um, poor eating and lifestyle, there's been studies done that saying people who have children um, don't eat as healthy and don't live as healthy a lifestyle in certain aspects.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Again, going back sort of to the environment, overpopulation, right? Why are we going to keep having kids if people talk about we're going to run out of resources due to overpopulation? Just the logistics of having a kid, what they're talking about here, reasons against. It's just to juggle all those things in life and then still keep my job and keep my relationship with my significant other and my friends, and just to be able to get the food and to put them to sleep and to clothe them and to get them through school.
Yeah.
It's just
You know what it
it's
is? It's all consuming, and that's what it is. It's like, if you're someone who is kind of struggling to manage your own life as an adult, then yeah, the introduction of a kid. I mean, I don't, I don't, I honestly don't know how some people do it. When you think of all that is required, and the cost for shortcuts is so high. You have a kid, but you're not willing to, like, make the sacrifices. It just seems like the potential for disaster is quite high.
yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, the amount of, just like, I remember when our kids were young and before this, they're in school. It's like, man, daycare, the cost of daycare is insane. I'm
It's
sure it's
astronomical.
I'm,
A lot of people, the one partner works just to pay the daycare. It's like, it's crazy.
yeah, yeah. And that's the math you do. You're like, okay, how much is daycare? How much are you making? How much is the mortgage? And you work it out and say, hey, it doesn't make sense for you to work, right? One of you maybe decides not to, but then it's really hard. It's really hard, and the math usually ends up when you talk to people, at least around where I live, and I'm not poor, I'm not rich, I'm like middle class, and I would say it ends up being like, oh, well, you both have to keep working because
Yeah.
it's just a little bit. You don't have enough to survive if one of you quits. So then you're both working and you're both doing this daycare. It's just under the threshold.
Hmm.
So it's just a mess. It can be a mess. And who knows, on top of that, what types of daycare problems and issues and things that could go on at those places too. I mean, another against passing down physical and or mental health issues. I could see if someone's like, hey, like someone's a schizophrenic and says, it runs in my family, maybe I don't want to do that,
Sure. There's all
or
kinds of things. I mean, if both your parents are alcoholics, you would do well to really, consider that possibility.
the last one they have here is having kids can create marital issues. Well, I mean, yeah, all the stress, all those things that we're talking about, the kids, the poor eating and sleeping, the environment, the economy, all the bills, and of course it can cause marital issues. I mean, the number one thing, like we talked about on the episode on marriage, was like usually we talked a lot about money, and that's the thing that, like, you can look at people who struggled. There's many times marriages have struggled because of money, and kids are definitely. We just talked about it. That's huge money.
Yeah.
It's like buying when we had two kids in daycare. It's like as if we bought three Cadillacs
Yeah.
and had them in the driveway. But guess what? We didn't. It
Right.
just was bringing the kids to these places to take care of them while we
Right.
were at work. That's how much the expense is. So it's crazy. But you know what I would say? You talk about all these fors and all these against. I mean, people who sounds a little selfish to me. If I look at it at a certain angle, like I don't want to have kids because it's too much money. I could be unhappy. Well, you know what? Get more sleep. Figure it out. How about eat healthier and don't give the kids hot dogs and macaroni and cheese every day, and then you're eating that. That's what they're talking about, right? The population. Look, we're not even at the replacement rate right now. And we could, as technology advances, we'll figure it out. The logistics, figure it out. Passing down physical mental health issues. Well, maybe in some cases I get that, but hey, medicine's coming a long way. And if there's certain physical things that are being passed down, they might be able to handle those better now. And marital issues, I mean, work at it. It sounds like a lot of excuses, people with confirmation bias to me saying all these reasons I don't want to have kids. It's like, I don't know. I almost go back to the thing. It's hard. It's going to be hard. And people are like, I don't want to do anything hard.
Yeah.
And I would say, it's not my saying. I've heard it 1,000 times, and I'm sure you have too. Nothing that's actually worthwhile in life is easy to do.
Yeah. I mean, I I know from some of our previous discussions that I'm not at all surprised to hear that that's kind of your point of view on it. I wouldn't disagree that it's selfish. I would just say that to acknowledge that up front, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with saying, "Hey, I'm selfish," or "I just like my life the way it is. I don't want to introduce these types of demands into my life." Like I get that. I can understand that. I could respect that. The only issue that I really have with it is, like I was saying before, we all must acknowledge on some level that we're here walking around having this life because our parents and their parents and their parents and their parents going back thousands of years had, every all of that led to you being here. And it's just, I don't know, man, it kind of blows my mind a little bit. I have a cousin in Italy. I don't exactly know, or I didn't know how we were related. She's my cousin. I've talked to her on occasion, and we were chatting, and we kind of figured out. I like worked backwards through the family tree because I was like, "How exactly are we related?" And it turns out that my dad's mom's mom had a sister. So my great grandmother on my dad's side had a sister that's her great grandmother. So her and I share a great great grandmother. This was in Italy, and before,
Yeah, yeah.
at some point someone came over to the States, and then they were having kids over here, and it's just there was something about that. It put in perspective for me. Like I know nothing about this woman. I've never met her. I don't even know what her name was, and yet I'm connected to her through the ages, and that's looking backwards. If you look forwards and you think like I'm asking myself the question, like I don't know what the world's going to look like in 200 years, but I do think it would be cool if there was a kid walking around that was part of me. He doesn't have to know my name, know anything about me or what I look like, just that his great great grandfather lived in, it's just you kind of have to step back and realize that it's much bigger than just you. There's like a lot more beyond your little sphere, your little life. The fact that you like to sleep in on Sundays and drink your coffee in bed, and you won't be able to do that anymore if you have kids. Like if you start to look at the big picture, I get why people are willing to make the kind of sacrifices that you have to make.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting. I was listening to a discussion. I don't remember the context. Where Jordan Peterson, he's that clinical psychologist who he's got his YouTube lectures and everything.
Yep.
And he was sort of saying like when people, it's in his view to be able, if you reach a point in your life where you are self-actualizing to be the very best person you can be, you're putting yourself in situations that are that are uncomfortable situations and learning new things and experiencing new things. And there's actually some studies suggesting that like your some of those situations are changing some of your chromosomes and adjusting, they're adapting, and that it's building, and then those get passed on and those get passed on. So like right now, if you become the best Ben that you can be, and you're like hitting all these new marks and doing all these new incredible things, you are actually like almost turning on switches in your DNA,
DNA, yeah.
activating switches that have been provided to you by people in this line, in this thousands of years of line. Oh, I didn't know I had that ability. I didn't know I could run 100-mile ultra marathon. Well, that's been in there for you, and then and so it's big, and you'll be there. You say in the future, if this is all true, then yeah, 1,000 years from now, when there's like people living in Jupiter. Well, I don't think Jupiter's probably gaseous, right? But
I go with Mars.
yeah, let's go with Mars. People living on Mars, and someone's walking around, it actually like figures something out and is living a great life and doing excellent things. Part of you is it's going to be they're engaging that part that they got from you at some point. So I mean, that's just an idea, but so I definitely think it's bigger than all of us. And I just really go back to all the reasons against. Now, if someone doesn't want to have kids, they're just like, I just don't want to do it now. I don't think it's right for me. Okay. But if these people who sort of tell you here's all the reasons why, like they've got this lined up argument, I'm like, it's just because it's hard and you don't want to do it. And I think that's something to take into account. And I would ask those people then, is your life a positive thing? For all the good, all the bad, the miserable, suffering existence that we all go through, some of us much more than others, obviously. Some people are better off in a better situation, right? That's the lottery of like what you're born into. I feel like it seems to be worth it for the experience. Their life overall can be a positive thing, and at least for me it is. And so I would say, yeah, life's a positive thing. Do you believe that life overall, on balance, is a positive thing?
I do. And I would just stipulate that, especially in the modern world that we live in, humans are very good at mitigating suffering largely. I mean, if you go back 1,000 years, life was very, very different, much harder, involved much more suffering, and the further back you go, the harder it was, the more suffering there was. So I think it gets easier as you move up through the ages, and we're the beneficiaries of that. Um, but yeah, I think that there are so many pleasures to be had, large and small. And because, we're very fortunate, we live in a first world country where the largest number of inconveniences and as much suffering as you could possibly eradicate has essentially been eradicated at this point based on modern, current technology and everything. I think that the human experience it's easy, maybe too easy.
Yeah, there could be an argument made for that. I mean, we call people poor and they're fat and have cell phones. I mean, so that's not really real poor. There's real poor in the world, that is really bad, because it's not, we are first world. We've got to understand that. But if overall, so my argument then, when I go to, if life is worth it and it's overall on balance positive, and a good thing, even if it's, hey, maybe it's not, we're struggling through serfdom and these bad times where there's tyranny, and then but we keep moving forward, and now life eventually is becoming more and more positive. If it's worth it, guess what? Someone had you, and someone had the person who had you, and going back, like you said, all the way back, people kept having, so you could be you, and now it's your turn. You have a kid, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna have my kids, and they're gonna have kids hopefully one day, and it's gonna go, and there'll be someone who 1,000 years now who has no clue who I am, but part of something that I did and that my sons did is within them. And if they can actualize and maybe flip that switch, sometimes something good they're doing, something positive they're doing, is going to be like, hey, a little bit like, yeah, I helped with that, right, right. And I don't want to, I don't
So
want
if
to.
if your kid, if your boys, if one of your boys decided not to have kids of his own, he just decided I don't, I'm going to do this instead of that. I don't think that's for me. Would you feel that he was robbing you in some way? And if the answer is yes, then that would mean that, like, if I chose not to have kids, I'm robbing my great 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 grandfather of his, he made the sacrifice, as did his son and his kid and his kid and his kid until it got to me. So if I choose to stop that passing on of the genetic material, am I robbing them?
I don't think I would say robbing, but I would say, if I want to just be frank about it, say like, you're taking advantage of everything and living with, like you said, life's little pleasures, big and small, um, and not giving back. So sort of like, hey, yeah, I'll take that. Like that's like going to a charity buffet, and someone says, yep, it's all free. We'd love for you to give a donation. You're like, yeah, it's good food, thanks, but I'm not giving a donation, and I'm
Yeah,
moving on.
yeah.
It's sort of like, I feel like the circle of life, man. I mean, let's go back, let's get that Lion King song fired up here, right?
I get it. I think I get it. So you see it as like the penance everyone's obligated to make their donation is.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's, now some people can't, some people never do for other reasons. Like, someone's a soldier goes away and, gets injured in combat, and then, he can't have kids. Like, well, that's not, no one's, that's not holding against the,
Sure.
because that's not his choice,
No,
right?
I got you. I got you.
So, but for, I think it's really quite selfish for someone to be like, oh no, you know what? Oh yeah, I do want the hovercraft in 1,000 years, but that's it. Like you said, it stops here, buddy. Not,
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. But why? Because it's hard. I would argue that, like I said, nothing good in life is easy, and things that are hard in life are good for you. There's a lot of good that comes from struggle and people toughing their way through things, and overcoming tough situations. And if someone's like, well, you know I mean, tough, it's a little tough, and I might not have a lot of time, and hey, look, like you said, yeah, I can't sit in bed and drink coffee and read the paper. Well, you know what, shut up about it and go out there and take that kid to that damn soccer game and make sure he's studying his homework, and pass it on, man, pass it on.
Yeah. But I could see why someone maybe wouldn't want to spend their life doing that. People don't want, like, if you believe and agree that life is precious and that time is short and that, like, we're here for a brief time and you should try to enjoy your life, and you don't enjoy going to soccer games, you don't particularly enjoy interacting with kids, you don't enjoy, I don't know. I mean, I think, like, someone that recognizes that and says, like, I don't want to play that game. That's not, like, the species isn't at risk. Humans are going to be fine. Yeah, I don't know. And the other thing is, I was going to say is that, like, what if someone just had a horrible childhood and grew up broken and knows that about themselves and said, hey, my parents were horrible. They weren't prepared. My childhood was very difficult. My life was really hard. And I'm an adult now. I'm trying to make better choices. I don't want to spend my adult years in servitude, to a little human being.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and I'm saying the way that I feel, and if I think through it, yeah, there are people that maybe shouldn't, or I would argue though that someone in that situation, like you just talked about, maybe they would be a better parent than in some cases, but
Sure.
obviously there's a lot of psychology going on there. Whereas we see repeat offenses, repeat things that happen as kids, and then they do it, so yeah, it's hard to say, but I think overall, I mean, like if everyone just said, screw it, let's just have fun, man, hedonism. Screw let's just all have a big party, no one have any more kids, and we'll just all die off
The
you
world
know
would be worse. Yeah. So your position then is that if everybody had a kid, everyone has one kid. If you're capable, if you have the biological capability, have one kid, the net effect, the world would be better. The world would be a better place.
Yeah, I think so. And It's almost like I feel like that's like someone. Let's take like we were talking about like wolves. Let's just say there's a wolf and says like, no man, like they have their thing and their biology tells them what to do, and this wolf's like, no, I'm a freaking mountain lion. It's like, no, you're not, man. You're a wolf. You get with the program. There's a big program here that's going on all around you.
Yeah.
you know it's undeniable. Embrace it. You'll learn so much more about yourself, and I feel like about humankind in general if you embrace it, right? Embrace it. Say, hey, I'm going to do this. This is
The
what
natural order.
yeah, the natural order of things, the circle of life, right? In general, not just talking about you, but when I say someone who's just like, hey, I'm not having kids, no way, screw that. I want to have a big sports car because if I have kids, I'm not going to have money for my nice stuff that I want and all this. I'm like, you know, you take advantage of society, all of the creations of human race, which we've talked about. Those wouldn't be here. That cool sports car, that computer, that cell phone, that those great movies or whatever it is, none of that stuff would be here. They're only possible because of the progress and the thought of generation after generation after generation. And it wouldn't happen without new minds. So someone's like, well, no, I just want it. I just want my stuff for me so I can enjoy life. I'm not giving anything back, and
Yeah.
I'm not pushing it forward. Like sort of like pay it forward, that idea.
Yeah. So I get it. I get it. I do get it. The problem is that if by one person choosing not to have kids or hundreds of people choosing, that progress isn't necessarily arrested. And like people know that. Of course, we know that as human beings, that like if Thomas Edison, for example, hadn't been born, doesn't mean that we wouldn't have light bulbs today. It means that someone else would have invented a slightly different kind of light bulb. Together as a species, we would have figured out electricity and light. We would have our houses would be wired up with something that Tesla came up with, instead.
Well, let me jump in because no, it wouldn't be arrested, all that progress and everything, but it would be limited, and it will be limited. The less opportunities and chance for new minds.
Yeah, but again, like so many of the things that we've kind of touched on here, that cuts both ways. It's like, yes, you won't have, you could miss the next Elon Musk.
Or the next Joseph Stalin, right? Or whatever. So
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I feel like there's an argument to be made for responsible parenting is obviously crucially important. Like you and I know that. I know what it looks like in areas where the single parent structure is prevalent. There needs to be responsible parenting. And if you're not responsible enough and you know that, maybe you're doing us all a favor by not having kids.
I see the point. I see the point. Of course, there are those situations where someone absolutely shouldn't have, or it's for all the wrong reasons. But I just think in general, being a part of a species, like be a part of it then,
Yeah, your points are taken too, and I agree with you. There is a certain obligation, even if it's just your parents have parents have parents have parents have parents, and like we've said many times now, that was all of that was culminated down. All of those sacrifices were made. All of that hardship was endured for you to be here walking around. And who are you to say, no, I'm not gonna.
I'm out.
I don't want the hardship myself.
Yeah, it's definitely your choice. Now, I'm not talking to you, but you in general.
No, I get it.
Listeners, your choice, to have kids or not, and there are reasons that someone would be maybe making a better decision not to, but I favor contribution overall over simply taking advantage and saying, well, I'm going to enjoy all those comforts and pleasures that life and an existence here on the planet has to provide. And even more so than many others, because I'm not going to have kids, and I favor the contribution over sort of taking advantage of progress that came before you. And I would say we are all in this thing together. So whoever is having those thoughts out there listening and saying Steve is full of it, man, you're one of us. You can't help it. You're one of us. Come join us.
Hmm. I mean, that's what evolution is. Evolution is there's these mechanisms that exist naturally, ensuring that the best versions of ourselves get passed on. And maybe to your point, someone saying like, "Oh, I don't want to have kids. I don't want that responsibility. I don't want to have to do the work. I don't want to make the sacrifices." Well, maybe that is Darwinism in effect. Maybe that is the species trying to rid itself of the type of members that would be like that can endure hardship or that are scared of hard work, scared of doing the big things.
That's a really good point. And that's why I said I can get along with you on that, because like I said, it's your choice in general. You in general, it's your
Yeah.
choice. So maybe if that is your choice, you could be right about that. That these are the types of things, those traits won't be passed on. I would add here, I had a thought when you were saying that it's almost like, you talked about the intelligence of humans and being able to rationally make those decisions and of what they like and what they want to go through, and it's not for me. It's like almost like, hey, stop overthinking things and live your life. Have kids.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the message from Steve. Have kids. And in the vast majority of cases, it'll work out and things will be better than they would be if we didn't have kids. My final thought would be if you don't want to have kids, don't have kids. If you do want to have kids, by all means. But more important than that, I think, is you are here. Somebody had you, you're here, you're walking around, you're part of society. Try to be a good person, try to be a responsible person. Don't throw trash on the ground. Don't hurt people on purpose. Don't contribute. Like we need to contribute. And those contributions they go beyond whether or not you have kids. So kind of to bring it back full circle here, do you need to have kids to be a contributing member of society? No, but that is a conscious choice that people make. I can't believe how many people I see throw trash out their car window. That to me is like, it seems like a weird example, but that is like the greatest example of how disconnected people feel from the fact that they're part of a society. The slightest inconvenience to you, I mean, just right out the car window on the street,
Yeah.
ball of foil, sandwich wrapper.
Yeah, the other day on my commute home, going through a windy country road, like I saw someone throwing trash out their window, and I know where it is. It's a place where you have to slow down, and it's like no one could see you. It's covered, and I'm like, they chose that area. They know that's wrong, so no one would see them. And like it's just definitely when you talk about, you can contribute to society. If you don't have children. But I think contributing to the continued progression of the human race and species and possible positive progress,
Yes.
I think there's no way to be able to contribute to that if you don't. But you surely can contribute to your current community, and you can be a good you know I don't think that, like, caretaker of what we're doing, and be nice, kind, and helpful to people, and serve the community, and give back, and just try to be a helpful, positive person. So
Yeah. Good. I agree.
I think we sort of wrap this one up. I think we agree to disagree, but in a lot of things we did agree on, and a lot of things we just sort of look at a little bit differently.
Yeah, and that is what makes these conversations valuable because it's not really about right and wrong. It's about perspective.
Exactly. And I think, like, so if someone's listening to this, like, hey, we're not exactly on the same page, but we did take some interesting points, especially your Darwin point of view. That was not on my radar. And now I'm really taking that. So, it's not like, if for the listeners, if Ben's like, well, I decided not to have kids, I'm not going to never talk to him again. Right. That's not what it's about. But I would know if he had made that decision, that he's doing that for him because he thinks things through, and I know he would have a reason for it. So sort of agreeing to disagree, but sort of agreeing on a lot too today.
A little bit, yeah. And for the record, my wife and I are working on it. We're working on it. We'll see what happens.
Well, if I wish you luck if that is the decision you decide to make.
Thanks, man. Thank you guys so much for listening. Balanced is produced by myself and Steve. Our intro music and outro music is performed by Four Giants. You can check them out on Spotify, Bandcamp, or wherever you stream music. As always, we welcome your thoughts, comments, topic ideas, and constructive criticism. Drop us a line at benstevebalancedpodcast@gmail.com. And thank you so much for joining us. As always, I'm Ben.
And I'm Steve.
And we are balanced.